Welcome. We congratulate you on your interest in running for the school board. Our purpose for this session is to provide helpful information which will give you a perspective on school board work and help you thoughtfully prepare for meaningful service to your school district and your district's public. I'm Harry Heiligenthal, Director of Leadership Development at the Iowa Association of School Boards, and with me for this session are colleagues who are anxious to help you consider the possibilities for school board work. Mary Jane Benz is the Director of Board Development at IASB. And Luann Gavist is another member of the board development team. And she's helping with the format, coordinating the logistics, and the technology for the webinar. And then our special guest presenter is Jeff Anderson, and Jeff is board president at Boone Community School District and president of the Iowa Association of School Boards. Jeff brings much experience and insight to our conversation. Thanks for joining us, Jeff.
Thank you.
If we leave you with one impression from this session, we hope it'll be that boardsmanship is about continuous learning. We hope the session will be a springboard for future learning that you will do as a board member. And with that, we'll ask Mary Jane to start us off with tip number 1.
Thank you, Harry. It's important to start your learning with simply becoming acquainted with the documents that drive your district. And some of those documents are the mission statement. That's the real North Star of your district. Why does your district exist? It helps the board in decision making, and it focuses in one way or another. Mission statements are different, but it's going to focus on all children. That's probably the first big learning for you, is that you are here to represent all children if you are elected. It's not just the children of maybe your director district or your neighbor's children. That can sometimes be a challenge. The beliefs and vision are another big guiding district statement that tells you about what's wanted for the future of your district. And then finally, the goals. And those goals are some specific priorities. What are the specific priorities that are being worked on? What are the initiatives that are being worked on in your district right now? So mission, beliefs, vision, and goals, those are things you'll want to learn about. As your new board member, you're going to be bringing new ideas and perspectives to the board. But it's also important to honor the work and the priorities of the existing board. Take time to approach the prior work of the board with an open mind. A key resource that can be helpful to you is IASB Standards for Effective School Boards. These are ones you're going to be learning about if you're elected. They're the result of extensive research on what makes for effective boards. And the very first standard, just like you want your children to reach standard, you as a board want to reach high standards. The first is visionary ethical governance team. And that's what you want to start thinking about, is how can I be part of a team that has a great vision, that is ethical, and that works well together. Jeff, talk to us a little bit about Boone's mission or vision or goals.
In Boone, our mission is to provide an educational environment that promotes academic and extracurricular excellence and development of good character in our students. That's our mission. That's what we focus on with what we do. Underneath that, we have a number of goals. Every year we revisit our goals, and we have 6 major goals that we do look at in our district. One of those goals, the biggest one probably in our view, is relating to student achievement, but we have other goals relating to professional development, infrastructure, climate and character, community involvement, and at-risk programming. And one of the ways that we try to keep those goals before us is during our agenda, we will have our agenda items linked as often as we can to those goal items. And so we may spend time on things that aren't related to our goals, but we don't spend a lot of time on our agenda unless it's actually related to those goal items.
It's neat to hear you, Jeff, talk about the idea that by having those goals linked to your agenda items, you're continuing to remind yourself, what are we here for? What are the important things we're trying to accomplish? So thank you. Let's move on to tip number 2. And the overall focus is on improving student learning. That's one of the main reasons that candidates across the state say that they've run for the board. And it's encouraging to know that a majority of board members place such a high value on students, because after all, the student group or students is the primary group that the board serves. It's also encouraging to hear a lot of board members say that they are in this work for all students. And we bold and underline and continue to remind ourselves we're in this work for all students. Now, one of the big challenges for board teams and board members is keeping that focus on student learning over time, so that both what our students need and the focus of all students are not just buzzwords. And this is, you talk about tough times or hard things to do. Think about this: when the perceived needs of your public vie for the board's time or compete for the board's time and attention, that's a tough thing to do to stay focused on student learning. For example, the public's desire for lower taxes and how that has to be balanced with the key needs of students, such as maintaining really important programs or even expanding or growing programs. Another example might be, heck, your community may have a strong desire to remodel a gym or to build a new gym, and that has to be weighed by the board against the need for perhaps something like remodeled or new science labs. Jeff, would you share with us maybe an example about how that notion of balancing student needs and community wants plays out in your district?
Well, it really can be a challenge because schools really operate with limited resources, or limited resources of time and limited resources of money. And so we have to really think carefully about how we allocate those resources to maximize the outcomes for students. One of the questions, and you alluded to it earlier, when we think about all the decisions we make, we ask, how will this decision impact student learning? And what you're going to find as new board members especially is that a lot of things will have constituencies. You'll have people who will approach you who say, we have too much emphasis on athletics, and you'll have people who will tell us we have too little emphasis on athletics, and sometimes even within the same day. And that's just one example. And so when you look at those sort of things there, again, you'll get the information on both sides. You'll hear the whole story. A lot of times people will approach you with their view or their take on a particular position, but there's often more than one, and often 2 or 3 positions that people may have on particular topics. And so your job as a board member is really to listen, to weigh the pros and cons, but really when it comes down to your decision, you really ask yourself, how will this decision impact student learning?
Thanks, Jeff. Let's transition to tip number 3. And I've quit counting the number of times that board members will talk with me maybe after that first year they're elected, and will come back and say, I made some promises and I wished I hadn't. And that is such a critical thing to remember. It's important for you as a candidate, and when you're elected as a board member, to remain open-minded. Often there's a really strong temptation to take a position or to be for something well before you ever get to the vote. In a real pull from community members or constituency, they'll want you to say, I can assure you that we'll have that new building on the north side of town or on the south side of town. Now, with that in mind, why should board members avoid making promises? Well, 2 key reasons. One, you really don't have any authority as an individual. The board only has authority as a board team, and you exercise that authority through deliberating and then casting your vote at the board table. Now, while community members may often think you have individual authority to make promises, in reality you don't. Another item is, and this again fits right in with board members who will say, I wished I hadn't made promises. The idea is, once you're on the board, you're going to be faced with learning a wealth of information. And you may change your mind as you learn more about issues. And as you learn more information about things like the budget, the structure of the district, When that happens and you learn more, an option that maybe didn't look like a very workable choice to you earlier could end up looking much more doable and appealing as you learn more information. So you're going to have an opportunity as a board member to be a part of informed discussions, and you'll want to have the opportunity to adjust your thinking as you learn more information and prepare to make an informed decision about topics. And with that, Mary Jane, we'll look to you to guide us through tip number 4, please.
An important thing for a candidate to do is to get a good handle on some of the big picture district facts. Just like you want your students to learn basic skills, it's good to approach board candidacy with some basic facts or background information. Now, here are some general areas of information to ask the superintendent about. As Harry said, there's a wealth of information out there, but this is a good area to think about: the enrollment of your district, whether student population is increasing or decreasing, and then get as clear as you can about the impact that that has had, those trends of increasing or decreasing student population have had on your budget. District boundaries. What are the general boundaries of your district? What kind of enrollment patterns exist? Is there open enrollment? Is there enrollment out? What does that look like? What general staffing patterns exist in your district? How many elementary staff do you have? How many secondary? And has that overall staff been increasing or decreasing? And what about administration? What is your administration patterns, and what are the responsibilities in general terms for those administrators? You'll want to allow time for in-depth learning in all of these areas in the fall, but it's good to have a general picture of your district in mind. The facilities. What existing facilities do you have, and how does the district plan for the future? Do they have a facilities improvement plan, and what does that look like? And then the last bullet's an important one, and one that's often overlooked, and that is to become aware of the importance of policy. We do not expect you to memorize the policy manual before you're elected. It's going to be pretty thick. But please be aware that your district has policy, existing board policy, and that is the voice of the board in the district. Be aware of the role the board has as policymakers. And Jeff, I'm sure you can give me a good example of that and how it works in Boone.
You know, policy really is so important. I think one of the things you'll find as a school board member is that policy may be your best friend in terms of your decision-making processes. One of the things that your policies do is they provide you guidance. They also give you a framework for decision-making. One of the things you'll often hear is hard cases make bad law. If something comes up and it's a tough case, it's really difficult to make a decision on those things sometimes. And in most cases, what you're going to find is there's already been a policy developed to address those situations. One of the things as a new board member, you really can look astute, is if you ask when you have something comes before your board and the board seems to be struggling with what to do, you know, ask the question, do we have a policy that speaks to this particular issue already? And a lot of times you'll find that you do, and it really will provide just a framework and guidance as far as, you know, how your decision process should be handled.
Luann is signaling us that a question came in. So Luann, would you please share that?
Sure, Harry. One of our participants wants to know what happens if a community member asks the candidate to promise something before a vote. What would be some guidance you would give that person?
Jeff, you want to take first stab at that?
You know, I would avoid trying to make promises. And again, a lot of times as school board members, you are elected officials, and we really are in a political situation. But the concern is that if you make promises without the full information, a lot of times you will not make the best decision possible. It's always appropriate to listen to those concerns, and they may push you to make a promise at that point and say, you know, I'm going to consider it. I'll listen to what you have to say. There may be other individuals who have information to share on this as well. And, you know, it is something that you probably will or could end up discussing at the board table. One of the things I would really encourage is at the board table is to have that discussion out in the open, transparently, to get it before the public. A lot of times when votes are taken, it shouldn't be a surprise after that discussion is at the table how you're going to vote. Sometimes board members will feel undercut is those situations where they assume somebody was thinking one way and all of a sudden the vote's taken and they vote another. If you have that really robust discussion at the table, you really won't get those surprises and you really will have a better decision-making process.
Thanks, Jeff. A reminder to our participants that you're welcome. In fact, we encourage you to submit questions using the process Luann shared at the beginning, and we will just interject those questions as they come in along the way, as well as add some on in the tail end. So let's go to tip number 5. School finances. And this is the analogy I'm going to make is similar to the last set of topics. We're not expecting you, before you are ever elected to the board or attend your first board meeting as a board member, to spend hours and hours and hours learning detailed information about the budget and detailed information about staffing and enrollment and all those sort of things. But what we are suggesting is the importance of an overview, gaining or gathering some big picture information around these areas. So let's apply this to finance. One of the key roles of the board in finance is determining the priorities or the district goals, and then advocating for and ensuring that as much as possible that the budget allocates adequate resources toward those goals and priorities. In other words, the budget should reflect the goals that will improve the learning of kids. Whatever you're trying to accomplish, do you have adequate resources behind that? A couple other sub-tips or areas to remember is by the time September elections occur and board members are sworn in the middle part of September, you know, the budget year already started on July 1, and 1/4 of the school year will have already almost unfolded. So you want to keep that in mind. The chances of having a huge impact on the budget for the current school year when it's already 1/4 over, probably not real strong. Another couple of tidbits. One of them is that student enrollment is the heavy hitter. It's one of the biggest factors in the size of your district's budget. It charts the course or sets direction for your budget. Another one, and a lot of times both for community members and sometimes for new board members, this area of different funds are used or designated for different purposes can be a tough one to understand. For example, some funds can be used only for buildings and grounds improvements. Other funds might only be used for special education programs. The money isn't one big common pot where the board and superintendent or business official can just pick and choose. Money is earmarked, and you will be able to learn your way into finance, school finance. It's complex. There's a lot of rules and nuances and restrictions, and you're not going to learn this overnight. However, Iowa Association of School Boards, our organization, offers many learning opportunities and resources about school finance. One of those handy ones is School Finance 101 at the State School Board Convention in November. This fall, we'll also be launching an online course on school finance. And of course, your superintendent and your district's business official, those are two powerful learning resources for finance in your own district. Jeff, if you would share with us a little bit about your perspective as a board member on the big picture kinds of info that candidates need to know and what it takes to be able to learn that kind of information.
You know, I would just reassure you as candidates for the school board, you don't have to know everything about school finance to become a school board member. But once you do become a school board member, you certainly will want to become more familiar with the key aspects of school finance. And as Harry mentioned, enrollment is a huge factor. Your superintendent and your business manager are the professionals who are you've hired to run your organization. They manage the budget. They help the budget. What you really want to do as school board members, you want to make sure that when working in conjunction with those individuals, that you're allocating resources, both of time and money, to get the desired outcomes that you want relating to student achievement and your other goals. And so that's really what you do. It's really more monitoring and just kind of asking those questions about the alignment of resources with goals. And that's really a big part. The other challenge that you'll sometimes face as a school board member, and Harry alluded to different funds for different purposes, as a school board member, I know we've gotten questions, how can you afford to build a new school when you're having to eliminate teaching positions? And again, that is a hard question, but it really does go back to the fact that there are different funds of money that have to be used for very specific purposes within the law. And again, you don't have to know those in the beginning, but you'll become familiar with those over time. And I really would reinforce the message of the importance of availing yourself of the opportunities like the school finance boot camps that are available at the IASB convention. Those really are great learning opportunities. And I would encourage you to ask your school business manager or your superintendent to perhaps accompany you to those meetings so that you can ask questions specifically of them at those meetings relating to your own district's situation.
And a little bit later in this webinar, we have, be in front of you in print, we have those dates for the convention in November. So Luann is indicating that we have another question to respond to. So
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. This person asked sort of two questions together. The first part was, is it possible to visit with the superintendent to see the district's budget and goals or the strategic plan? And the person also knows the superintendent's a very busy person. Is it bothersome to ask time for those kinds of things?
Mary Jane, would you share some thoughts on that, please?
Certainly, all of those things are available to the public that you were mentioned, I believe, in that question. The budget and the goals and the strategic plan, those are public documents, and yes, you could see them. As for bothering the superintendent, I think typically superintendents would like to know what you are interested in about the board work and about those documents. But I would say it's very important to remember to make an appointment, to be respectful of their time, to let them know these are the kind of information I'd like to see so that they have time to make sure they have access to that information, have it handy for you.
Absolutely, and I think if they know, as Mary Jane said, you've asked for an appointment, they'll work hard to accommodate that. So, cool. Let's transition to tip number 6, Mary Jane.
Sure. Tip number 6 is about board meetings and remembering that where the board does its work is at its meetings. That's where the board makes decisions, and that's the work of the board. By law, Iowa does have an open meetings law, and so by law, the public has a right to hear those deliberations and those decisions, except in a very few specific instances where the law allows for a closed session. The public does not have a given right to participate in the deliberations, but they may be given the opportunity to speak to the board at specific times during the meeting agenda, and that all happens according to procedures that the board has in place. Because of that, if you have not been a frequent flyer or a regular attendant at board meetings, we'd really encourage you to attend the board meeting before you might actually be elected. Those are meetings in the public view. They are not a meeting of the public, and it's important that the board has and honors procedures for the way it conducts those meetings. And once you come on the board, it's going to be important for you to be ready to work with those procedures. It's very critical to recognize that the board must do its work in the meeting, in the public view, at the board table. Conversations about school business involving a majority of the board when meeting notice has not been published or posted violates the open meeting law. For example, if you have 3 or 5 board members discussing school business while standing in the parking lot or a meeting at the coffee shop, or 4 or more of a 7-member board, getting together and having just a quick discussion before the meeting, before the public knows that they're going to be meeting, that is a violation of the Iowa Open Meetings Law. So it's going to be important for you to be ready for that kind of work and working together as a team. To remember that as a board member, you are a part of the team, and that team does its work at the board table. Attendance at meetings is an essential function for a board member, and that brings up the next slide, tip number 7. And tip number 7 is a really important one. Consider the time commitment. As we said, a part of that is attendance at board meetings, but it is more than attending board meetings. But thinking about that, if you are planning to live 7 months out of the year in Arizona, probably you are not going to be able to make the time commitment, even as pleasant as that may sound, to being a board member. You will find that as a board member, you'll want to be able to attend meetings. You'll want to be able to take time to study the information that's going to be sent to you by the superintendent and the board secretary. There'll be a packet that will come to you before each meeting. The superintendent may well send other updates, email, hard copy of a note to the board at the end of the week or whatever. All of this material requires setting aside time for reading and thoughtful attention. And we realize you already have a busy life, but it is thinking about taking time to set a regular time when you're going to just commit to studying the material, to being aware of the information you receive as board members. It's essential for board members to be learners. Take every opportunity you have to be a continuous learner. And part of that time commitment, we hope, will be attending IASB's convention in November. It's a terrific opportunity to network and learn from other practices of others who are effective board members. Find a location near you and plan to attend one of IASB's 15 regular orientations for new board members this fall. Those are available on our website. In addition, your district will likely schedule orientation opportunities or activities at the local level, and be prepared to think about committing time to those as well. Jeff, talk to us a little bit about how much time you see board members spending.
You know, it varies. The meetings sometimes can take anywhere from an hour or two to sometimes you will have some agenda items and some big items that you'll need to discuss where the meetings can actually take longer. One of the things I guess I would encourage prospective board members to do is find out when the school board does meet. If they meet on the second Tuesday of the month and you have an existing conflict with that date, you may have a problem or a conflict that would make serving on the board a real challenge. Also, Mary Jane referred to the packet, which is the packet of materials, which is the agenda, but also all the supporting items that go along with that agenda. It may be the bills that you're going to be approving. It may be some information relating to agenda items relating to student achievement or a purchase of some sort, whether it's a facility situation or a bus or things like that. But that information is in a packet. Now, historically, that's been provided in paper format, but more and more school districts are going to an electronic board meeting and those materials are being delivered electronically, which not only do you see, but everyone else can see as well. And that does really increase the transparency of the work you do. And that's one of the things, going back to the previous tip too, is just remember the importance of transparency. If you're doing the work of the district in the public view, and so people should be able to know and understand what the decisions you made and why you made them.
Thanks, Jeff. Helpful insights and great insights from the practitioner's view here. All right, we're going to take a minute and hear from you. So what we're going to ask you to do is to respond to a quick poll, and we want you to weigh in on some skills that you value highly as a board member. So Luann, would you please launch the poll for us?
You bet, Harry. It's up and everyone should see it now.
Great. So these are essential skills for board members. These have been identified over recent years by practicing board members and superintendents. And what we're asking you to do is, would everybody who's participating tonight please choose two that you value the most or highly, and just pick two, and then in a minute we'll take a look at the results of this poll and we'll share some additional thoughts.
Well, Harry, I'm sure it's hard to, these are a great list, I'm sure it's hard to only pick 2. So I can tell that people are really deliberating right now and thinking as they're voting, and it looks like about half of our attendees have voted, so we're just going to leave it open for another moment.
That sounds good. We won't let anybody off the hook yet, will we?
No.
This would be the time to use the old saying, we know who you are, right?
Yeah, right. Okay, so I think it looks like about everyone has voted. So, Harry, you ready to see the results?
Here we are.
Okay. And there you go.
Pull those back up for a minute. And Jeff and Mary Jane, feel free to comment on any of these that that you see or you want to speak to.
Well, I think that open-minded one is a great choice because, as Harry mentioned, making promises is not a good idea. And it does kind of take away from the public's perception that you're open-minded, and really from your fellow board members' perception that you're open-minded if you've already been making statements that this is exactly what has to happen.
And I find myself at times gravitating toward that, the importance of that good listener. It's so easy to be preoccupied with what I'm going to say next, or finding the right page in my materials or whatever, defending my prior comment, that I might completely miss what my colleagues at the board table are saying. Jeff, any thoughts you want to share regarding the poll here?
You know, and I think you can't really underestimate the importance of the trust and the trustworthy skill or trait there. Again, as school board members, we are given a very important trust for the education of the young people in our communities, and I think there is an expectation that we will be trustworthy and that we will operate in a transparent fashion and that we will make decisions that are in the best interest of students, and that we will consider things with an open mind. All those things really do support the idea of trustworthiness.
Great, thank you. And Luann, go ahead, please, and close out of the screen.
Okay.
We'll maneuver around and pick up on the next slide. Tip 8. I'm going to glide through these pretty quickly and would like to make an overall or overarching comment. Again, open-minded. These are from your colleagues, board members and superintendents across the state, willing to learn, prepared, good listener, trustworthy. Now, as we were preparing for this session, I was reminded of a comment from a board president recently, and the board president said, you know, bottom line, most people already display these skills or believe they display these skills, and this board member went on to share that they felt having your heart in the right place is probably the most crucial quality. And their comment was, you know, as board members, we can learn the technical skills, we can learn the educational info to be an effective board member, and if our heart's in the right place, that'll make it hum, it'll make it work for us. On the flip side of the coin is if a candidate has an axe to grind or a narrow reason they're running for the board, they're likely to encounter a harder time as a board member. And part of what's going on behind this, or behind the scenes, is, you know, there's so much more to being a board member than just advocating for 1 or 2 items. And if a candidate has a narrow reason for running, it's just a great reminder to be aware of the pitfalls for that. Let me share a couple examples. Running for the board to terminate a coach or teacher and administrator. Well, there are a lot of things at play that are a part of that process. There's employment laws, procedures. The board has specific roles in the termination process. The superintendent and principals play key roles in staff evaluations and making recommendations for staff employment. So, and another one, there's always multiple sides to a story. So it's important to be cognizant of or learn about all those factors that play into that. Here's another one that sometimes comes up. A candidate is running for the board, and they may have a friend or relative or neighbor who is not fond of or has said the district staff development time is a waste of our time. Well, again, bigger picture than just that narrow viewpoint. For example, what teachers are learning every Wednesday or when they're working in teams every other week during staff development time, that initiative, that reading initiative that they're working to get into place, that may be your district's best option to raise the reading achievement and the reading scores of students across your whole district. And if that may be your best option, you don't want to inadvertently be derailing or sidetracking that option before it gets traction. The other couple things that might be at play is, again, there are multiple sides to every story. Teacher leaders who might be actually helping that initiative go in your district, you may have not even heard from them yet. You may be hearing from a narrow slice of folks rather than the big picture on what's happening. So anyway, Jeff, do you want to add any additional thoughts about what you see makes a great board member?
You know, and again, I think the things that make a great board member, some of them are on that list, but, you know, it is really also that ability to really embrace kind of diversity of opinions, to be open-minded to those opinions there. What you're really going to find as board members is if everybody thinks the same, you're going to get the same results all the time. Being open to different opinions, to being consider options, those are really important things. As school board members, we really do sometimes face a challenge. On one hand, we want to kind of be the head cheerleader for our district. We really want to promote all the great things that are happening, and really there are some fantastic things that are always going on in schools. But at the same time, we're never satisfied with where we are. And so sometimes it seems like we're having to be the chief critic for our district when we're really just trying to push everything forward to try to get the best results for our kids, because we really want to do what's best for them. And so it really is that kind of that balancing act. You don't want to be overly critical, but you can't be overly optimistic, and you just really have to find that balance sometimes as a school board member.
Thank you. All right, let's move. We're transitioning to our last couple of tips. Tip number 9. And the encouraging part of this tip is learning what makes an effective board superintendent team. The focus on this one is the whole team, not just individual board members. And we're proud of and pleased that IASB, your school board association in Iowa, has really been an important player in that groundbreaking research on the board's role regarding student learning. And we have enough of a picture now from research that we have a good sense about what the role of boards looks like in this work. An obvious one is those board teams are focused right at student learning. You know, this is another one of those times I've quit counting when board teams will say we got pretty preoccupied the last couple of years with a building or remodeling project, and that was good and it needed to happen and people saw that and it created energy, but we've really pulled away from or lapsed in our work on student achievement. What do? We kind of smile and look at them and say, you focus right on it. Allocate time to aim right after student learning. A second role for the whole board team is supporting each other as a board team and supporting your staff work, the priority work that they're doing to improve student learning. A third one is holding yourselves as a board team and your superintendent accountable to see that you're spending that time on that work, hearing reports and updates, and monitoring progress toward those student learning goals or priorities that you're trying to achieve. Engaging and informing the public. And again, there's never, it seems like, enough time for the kind of community relationships and communication you want. This particular bullet is, are we engaging and keeping our public informed and how well around our efforts to improve teaching and student learning? And then the last one, which we compliment you, you're doing this tonight. You're modeling your ongoing learning in this webinar, and it's equally important that your board team models learning at your board table. What you're spending your time on there, your public, your staff notices, and you have a great opportunity to reinforce what's important by how you spend your time at the board table. All right, Mary Jane, would you walk us through the 10th tip, please?
And this picks right up where Harry left off, except it's taking it one step further. And it's saying to you, really take time to commit to ongoing learning. Get your calendar out, take a look at your fall calendar, and commit to spending time to learn about being a board member. It's interesting because people think being a board member is just something that you do. You go to meetings and maybe hand out diplomas. But it's a lot more than that, and it takes ongoing learning. When I first was a board member, I was working in teacher education. I thought, well, I know how to do this, but I was amazed at how steep the learning curve is as you come on the board. Really take time to think about the activities that might be scheduled for you and your local district, but also look at your calendar and check out the IASB website for things like the IASB orientation for new board members. And there's probably one scheduled close to you because they're in 15 different locations around the state. For most of you, a session should be within an hour or less of your district driving time. A lot of new board members attend these orientations, and veteran board members and superintendents find it helpful to attend as well. It's a great way to learn together, for the experience to review, and for the new board members to learn about things for the first time. Please mark Thursday, November 19th on your calendar for the IASB convention. Luann is here, and she's our convention director, and she is definitely giving me the thumbs up, saying, say it again, Mary Jane. November 19th is the IASB convention, and Wednesday, November 18th is our pre-convention activities, which are very interesting as well. Learning can make a big difference for the kind of board member you can be. It can also make a big difference for the education of your children. One thing that we have at IASB that's an ongoing source of information is our IASB website. And that's the next slide. Check that IASB website for additional information and resources. We encourage you to review the Care About Children brochure that we've made available through your district. You'll also find it beneficial to watch the video. There's a video entitled, So You Think You Want to Run for the School Board. It's a dean board moderated panel with board members and a superintendent from different regions of the state, varying sizes of districts, sharing their insight about the work of boards. So Jeff, just quickly, what are your thoughts about ongoing board learning and the importance of being a learning board member?
You know, becoming an effective school board member is, I guess I would say, is more of a marathon than a sprint. I've been a school board member for 23 years, and I've attended many of the events that Mary Jane talks about, and I've had the opportunity to attend the new board member orientation meeting on a number of occasions as board president. Every time we've had a new school board member on my board, I've tried to accompany him to that meeting there. And it is amazing. Every time I go, not only do I learn something new, but I also have the opportunity to understand what are the questions that new board members have. And it really is interesting to have that perspective. It's such an important thing. Our role as board members is really something that we learn and develop over time. And again, you don't have to know everything to get elected to the school board, but to become an effective school board member, you really do have to commit to that learning over time. And I really can't, I would really say that new board member orientation is a great first learning opportunity. And again, I would encourage you to try to bring your school superintendent or your board president with you to that meeting because it really is a good opportunity for you to learn together.
All right, time to ask our participants to work a little bit for a minute here. So Luann, if you would please launch the next poll. And these are our next steps. We've talked about different strategies and ways that you might learn more about the district between now and board elections. So as Luann brings the poll up, here again, would you please skim the list and pick 2 actions that you think would be a higher priority for your learning over the next couple of months. And then after you choose those, we'll give a couple of minutes for others to weigh in, and we'll look at the results. How are we coming on the poll, Luann?
Oh, Harry, it looks great. It looks like we have about half of our folks have voted. Some are still deliberating in their thinking.
That's good thinker, thoughtful participants here. So we'll hang on for a few more seconds.
Okay, just a couple more moments. And Harry, just want to remind our participants again that recording of this webinar and the PowerPoint will be posted on our website just as soon as we can get it up, so folks can come back and watch it again, or other interested candidates can watch it later.
All right, so looking across the screen here, my hat off to 2/3 of you, or at least, yes, 2/3 of you picked attending a local board meeting.
So I'll go ahead and share the results.
Yeah, that would be a good thing before I start talking, wouldn't it?
You were doing a sneak peek preview.
There you go. Anyway, good for you, whether you've attended a board meeting before or not. A good investment of your time. And then there are things you can be watching for. What are the routines? How does the agenda drive what happens during the board meeting? Are there opportunities for staff or public or community comments, and what do those look like? A great way to learn a little bit more ahead of time. Jeff or Mary Jane, is there anything else that you want to comment from looking at the results of the poll?
And I would encourage you to reach out to the school superintendent as well. As we mentioned before, it really is effective school board superintendent teams really do drive school achievement. And really in the high achieving schools, that is the sort of teamwork that you do see. And you really can't begin soon enough to build that relationship. They would welcome the opportunity to share with you the goals of the district, maybe the challenges of the district, some of the enrollment trends, all those things that you really need to know as a school board member. And so I would encourage you to reach out again during the summer months. That would be an opportunity to lead up to the election to make an opportunity to sit down and talk with the school superintendent of your district to really find out more about that.
Great. And just a plug for the last item, the IASB's website. We're excited, and yet it will be a change for you. Our new website will launch in early July. So if you've started to get used to where items are now, hopefully they'll be much easier to find in the new website, but it'll take a little maneuvering around to find your way. Luann is signaling us again. Time for another question here. So
Harry, as I transition back to your PowerPoint, there we go. The question is, who gets to vote at the board table? Do superintendents or anyone else vote on important decisions?
That is a great question.
It is.
Because the individual I noticed in their question said that's how the superintendent doesn't seem to vote at their board table, and that is how it works. That's just a great question because it brings up the role of the board and the role of the superintendent. And the superintendent is a feeder of information to the board and provides oftentimes a recommendation to the board. But the board members are the ones who vote. Do you want to clarify that for us a little more, Harry?
You bet. And I think a second person too sometimes that will be typically at the board table will be the board secretary, and they again are not a voting member. So it is only the 5 or the 7 board members on local board teams who vote. And if you're on an AEA board, might be a 7 or 9 member board, it's only the board members who vote. Jeff, anything else you'd want to add on that one?
Yeah, as the elected officials, the school board members are the ones who vote, as Mary Jane mentioned. A lot of times the superintendent will provide a recommendation on what the superintendent he or she advises. But yes, only the school board members do vote at the board table.
Great. Any additional questions for right now, or shall we come around the last turnpike here.
We have a nuts and bolts question, but I can wait for that one, Harry, if you'd like.
All right. Sure. We'll tack that on the tail end then.
Great.
Important dates coming up. Just want to get these in front of you. More detailed information about these are in documents that are linked on the IASB, the School Board Association website. But key dates, even though we're a couple weeks out in front of when candidates can actually file their nomination papers, we wanted to conduct this webinar this early so candidates can make an informed decision. You have a couple of weeks to decide, do I really want to proceed and file papers? And then the last day is on the 30th, and I believe it's 5 p.m. that day, and there aren't any exceptions. So you want to make sure that you file your papers within that time frame. Another tidbit I would say is that in your local districts, a school secretary or the board secretary, they're probably going to be as knowledgeable and as handy at being able to answer questions for you as anybody in the state, particularly when there are specific questions. Like I noticed that in our school district, school board members are elected by director districts or neighborhoods or geographic region. Am I applying for the position in the right region or director district? They'll be able to help you with those sort of things. And certainly, if the school secretary or school board secretary isn't available, then email or call us and we'll be glad to help you out as well. And then election day on the 8th, and for those who are elected, your life moves into an important new place. Luann, we have another question?
Yes, I do. The first one is about the petition. As you mentioned, Harry, we have information about some guidance for candidates on their paperwork, but this one is specific to that. How many signatures does a person need for their petition?
And it depends on the size of your district. So there's a formula that the state calculates. And again, either the auditor's office or your school secretary will be able to give you particular details on how many signatures are needed.
So even though the form only has a certain amount of lines on it, that doesn't mean that's how many signatures I would have to get?
You know, that's a great one because somebody asked recently and said there's 15 lines on this sheet. Do I only need 15 signatures? Yeah. In their case, no. They needed to complete 2 or 3 sheets worth. They needed 40-some signatures in their area. So great question. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, great. You're sending in great questions. Thank you. And Harry and Jeff and Mary Jane, we have another one. This participant wants to know, do you have any thoughts or advice on addressing community members' concerns that are brought to you on past board decisions?
Who'd like to take a stab at that?
Everybody's looking at Jeff.
You know, and that'll happen, and sometimes there can be some very contentious issues in districts that can, you know, divide communities, and even in some cases you'll have split decisions on boards, and people will ask, well, how would you have decided that? And again, you're trying to answer a question based on less than full information. You maybe weren't there, you didn't have the full information, you didn't have access to all the information that those board members did. And again, that doesn't mean that you're always going to have a unanimous decision on a board. Sometimes you will have a divided decision. But one of the things that's important to consider, keep in mind as board members is that once a decision is made, it's very important really, even if you were on the you would consider to be the losing side of a vote, to really support the overall decision of the board. It's really important for that cohesiveness of the board team and for the district that even though you may not, you know, get your way on a particular issue, that you do support the decision of the board. But people will try to put you on the spot there, but I would certainly, you know, listen to their concerns. I would ask them questions. I would really try to avoid making a commitment because you really didn't have the full information available that those board members had.
And you can always thank them for their interest in the district and thank them for their concerns about the district. But it is really important to remember that until you have access to all the information that has led to that decision, you may not be able to pass judgment on those. And that's what you want to convey to people. I'm really trying to be open-minded as I come on the board.
Absolutely. That patron who's saying, I don't think we should have built the building on that side of town, or it wasn't the best use of money to add this wing or addition or buy this piece of property. What you may not know is that if there are contracts already happening, contracts and commitments already made, money's been spent, to try to undo something in mid-course could be a real painful experience financially, as well as is it in the best interest of your district. So, Luann, any additional questions that we want to speak to as we near the end here?
No, we still have a few more moments, though. If anyone has another question, they may certainly submit it, and I'll be watching.
Well, then we'll pause for a few seconds, see if any other questions come in, and then add a couple of wrap-up comments, and we'll call it a night. So if you have questions, feel free to submit them now. Okay, well, on behalf of our team, kudos to you. We thank you for participating in this webinar tonight. And Luann mentioned earlier, and we said something at the beginning, but a reminder to you, it's recorded, and within the next couple of days, the link for this webinar will be posted so you can review it, or if you know of another candidate who didn't have a chance to participate tonight, they'll be able to watch the recording. If you have additional questions about your candidacy or election steps, again, we've mentioned earlier and just want to repeat that your district secretary or board secretary can be a great resource person for you, or you can call or email IASB, and our phone number will be on the next slide, so that'll pop up again. Luann, a question. You're waving the flag here. So.
Yes, this is about a bigger picture about the support that boards have across the country, and this person wants to know if other other states have school board associations supporting them.
Yes, and there are school board associations in states across the country, and each state school board association has its own personality and provides a different array of services, and so yeah, Mary Jane or Jeff.
And we have, as Harry said, we have that phone number and that email address up on our slide right now. Please be aware, as we said, every state has one. We feel that we do a primo job of just welcoming your questions. We're all about the questions here. And so we'd like to have you give us a call, ask any questions that you have. One of the advantages of school board service is that you are going to be a member of our organization, and that allows you to call and seek advice, and we're glad to give it. That thank you is well meant, and I'll let our guest here, an acting board member, Jeff, can you say?
You know, and I guess I would, and when talking about questions, a lot of times asking the right questions is a lot more important than having the right answers, especially in the beginning as a school board member. Don't be shy about asking questions. Don't be reticent. If you have a question, if you don't understand a term, if you don't know the terminology, if they use an acronym that you're not familiar with, don't be afraid to ask. And sometimes that really can change the behavior on your board too. A lot of times we get very matter of fact after we've been on the board for a while. We kind of know the drill, we know the routine, and we don't think about those questions, and that asking those questions can be a very transparent activity. You're asking the questions a lot of times that we're not even thinking about anymore because it's got moved in the back of our mind. You're asking the questions that the public really is concerned about, and that's a really important role that especially new board members can play.
Absolutely, and those times and opportunity to ask questions, some of them are especially fitting at the board table, and then there are other areas where if it's maybe just learning, you may be the only new board member this fall or one of two. Another opportunity to ask questions there would be to talk with the superintendent, the board president, the board secretary about, here are 3 things I'm wondering about. What would be the most effective way for me to learn about item X or item Y or Z? And they'll be able to give you guidance. Some things like that, background information, they may choose to meet with you ahead of a board meeting and provide that background then. There's a lot of opportunities. All right, any closing comments by anybody else? Final thoughts here.
Just, I appreciate this last slide. Thank you for considering this valuable service to the students of your school district. We see districts in Iowa operating better because of decisions that boards make, and they're a better place for children to learn. So thank you for considering this service.
Absolutely, and remember, we're here to help. So any support we can give you to equip you to do the best work possible as a board team and an individual board member, count us in. And with that, thanks again for your time tonight.